2-month deep dive into our relationship with money. Naheed Belgeonne is here to help us start this process from a place of calm. Naheed is known as the Nervous System Whisperer, a somatic movement coach, breath and yoga teacher with a passion for sharing the healing benefits of movement. Her new book, Soothe, the book your nervous system has been longing for, out March the 21st, but we can pre-order from today, guys, is a freeing and revolutionary approach to body tranquility that can help us breathe, move, and care for our overworked nervous systems better. And tonight, my lovely friend and teacher, Naheed, is here to introduce the book and her Soothe method. So hello, Naheed, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for this lovely book. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Hi, Tony. I have a little joke that I love what you do so much that I wrote a book so you would quiz me about it.
No, I'm just so happy to have it. I haven't even shown everybody yet. We have had it up on.
Yes.
Yeah, here we go. Here it
And
is.
the final version, because Tony got the special VIP uncorrected proof, but the final version has got gold foil on it, and she really glows. So look at that.
I think I love that.
Yeah, I love that as well.
Guys, we love it. We love a book cover with a bit of metallic on, don't we?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we do. Well, I feel as well, I think I'm calling this like a bit, for me, it's a bit of a full circle moment, this interview, because I've always looked up to you so much. Like when we first met, it was before self-help even existed in my head. And I think I've always seen you as a person who is very successful, but successful at business, but also successful at life. And I think that's been the kind of the biggest, I said on Instagram earlier, an expander. So kind of like watching you kind of transition from business owner to practitioner. It's kind of like, I mean, you've always been a practitioner, but now kind of really deep diving into this work. And it's so I'm so excited to have the book in my hand and to be able to interview you and introduce you to the community. So it's a really special moment for me too.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. And actually, it's right back at you. And actually, I was thinking about your little your story that you put up. And it's all about surrounding yourself with people that really inspire you, so kind, lovely people. But I think we all inspire each other. So yeah, back at you.
Yeah. And I think when you find those people, it's so important, isn't it, to kind of like keep hold of them and keep supporting them and letting them support you too.
Yeah.
So where are you today and how are you?
So I'm really good, actually. I am in my garden studio. So I moved to Deal from London over 2.5 years ago. Just because, pandemic, I wanted some more space and I wanted a bit of a quieter life. And I wanted to be more peaceful, actually. And I love the sea. And after kind of going all the way around the fast trains back into London just in case circumstances would have changed, I ended up in Deal because it was just a great place. It's got a really high kind of gay population, so it's very liberal. And there was, some nice affordable houses that I could buy, nice gardens, and I built a studio. So I'm kind of in my really happy place. And every time I get in here, I just think, God, I'm so lucky. Normally it's men that have little man caves or spaces for themselves, don't they? But I've just got this massive space that I built and it's mine, all mine. And I can go here and think and teach. I teach online. And I've just bought myself a reformer so I can do that all day long. And yeah, so it's a really happy space.
Brilliant. You're so right. There are loads of man caves around, and in all the kind of interiors books, it's like for women, make yourself a corner, like a nice corner. It's like, no, I want a whole shed with a reformer in it. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And nobody comes here, not even the dogs, so it's great.
Not even the dogs.
Not even the dogs.
Story in the book about how you used to be scared of dogs, because I only know you as a dog lover. So that's going to be a brilliant example to refer to, I think, as we talk about kind of how our brain and body affects each other. So it looks in the chat like everybody's having quite Monday, so quite frazzled. So this is a perfect session for everyone, I think. What does a typical day in your life look like, Naheed, then now? So you're not in the city, but I imagine, well, I know you're a person who takes routine quite seriously, and we love morning and evening routines here. So I'd love to know what your current ones are.
Okay, so it's I've sort of grown into my granny habits, I think. So I wake up and I breathe for 20 minutes, and I'm going to teach you something along those lines a little bit later on. And it's a particular even paced breath. You probably know it. It's 6 in, 6 out, 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. And I do that for 20 minutes. And then I get up and I sort of meander downstairs. My husband will have taken the dogs out for a walk. Sometimes I'll go with him and have a nice big long walk. And then I'm generally in doing my kind of most active working out. So it'll be the reformers. I've got a little mini power plate. I've actually recreated my studios in my studio. So I set up the first power plate studios in the UK. And I've recreated that here. So I've got a little mini power plates here. I work with lots of resistance as well. I've got kettlebells. So I'll do that for about an hour of that and some mobilization. And then the very first thing that I make myself do is it's all the marketing and the sales stuff because I actually really enjoy that. And then I work in blocks of 90 minutes on and 20 minutes off because that's the way the brain works. The brain waves kind of work like that in terms of focus. And I'll probably have 2 or 3 bouts of very intense focus work in the day. And then the 20 minutes where I'm not focusing quite so hard, that could actually be admin. But, because I've got a garden, I go off and I garden or I weed or I play with the dogs or I might meditate. But it's kind of like doing something where you're not focusing at all. Generally tend to try and have lunch with my husband because that's the whole point, isn't it? Or working from home, that you can really build your life into that. And then I generally try and finish by about 4 o'clock. I'm pretty much done by then because it's quite intense, my day, and I'm teaching quite a bit as well. So some of those intense periods of working will be teaching one-to-ones. And so that's what I mainly do nowadays is I have a program called the Soothe program. It's 12 weeks long and I'll really deep dive with the client into something that's going on for them. It's normally chronic stress, anxiety, burnout. And more and more over the last 2 years, I have psychotherapists, sorry, who refer their clients to me when talking therapies has reached their end. So it's people with quite deeply held trauma issues. And yeah, I work quite intensely with them on a one-to-one for those 12 weeks. And then I teach retreats and weekends and day retreats. I do quite a few in London. Yeah, so it's kind of I sort of make up my work and it takes its own direction and it's really nice. I have a lot of space around what I do as well to be able to daydream and think, which I really love, which I certainly didn't have before.
Yeah. What about your evening routine? Because that's something that I'm going to try and make an effort this year to do because I've never really had one.
Yeah, so I'm not really somebody who sits and watches TV. So I try and have a walk at dusk with the dogs, because that's really good for your circadian rhythm to know that it's now nighttime. So in the morning I'll get up straight after my breath work. I'll come into the garden, just make sure my light has got daylight. And I've started doing that in the last 5 years, the more I found out about circadian rhythms, and it really works for me. Because truth be told is after years and I'm a Londoner and you get used to that busy sort of lifestyle that I was a real night owl and I get up late-ish. Or actually probably what I do is get up quite early and then go to bed really late. So my sleep was really shrunk. And so over the last few years, I've really been trying to work on that. So the walking at dusk, I try to eat at 6 p.m. It's quite a light meal. And then I'm just really getting into trying to read in the evening rather than or listen to the radio. I much prefer that than visual stimulation. And then before I go to bed, I'll do some somatic movement, and there's some nice jiggling and lots of things that you can do to just deal with your body's tension, the daily tension of the day. And I will do that throughout the day as well. I'm a great believer in moving stuff out with you. I don't believe in sitting with your emotions. My thing is like feel them and then move them through you.
Mm.
And that's really interesting because we are moving organisms. We're not thinking organisms. Our brains develop not for thinking, but for complex movement. So that really chimes with your biointelligent body for how you kind of deal with stress. And then I'll get to bed and I will have a little, I'll read or might listen to something.
Yeah.
And then I'm really trying to go to bed at 10. That's where I'm moving myself towards. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. But that's kind of where I'm trying to get to. Really busy when you're writing a book, to for everything to go out the window. So I think I'm recovering from writing the book actually.
You probably are. You need some,
It's,
but then
it
you've got
was
all
a
this time now.
I've got all this time. It was probably the first time in a really long time that I understood what it meant to sit down all day.
Mm.
And I think I got a bit depressed actually. I felt a bit flat about it. And I had lots of aches and pains. So it's funny that, isn't it, to kind of live the life of, maybe most people live again after not having done it for so long. And I found it quite difficult.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
find
I
it
suppose,
quite
like
a
you say,
difficult thing to do.
most of your clients probably would present with issues that come, and that, like you say, whether that's mental, emotional, or physical, that a lot of that
Yeah.
is from being still a lot of the day.
It is, yes, it is. And that it's really funny actually, because when you were little, when you were a kid at school, if you had to sit down and all day, you'd act up, if that didn't suit you, and it doesn't really suit anybody, but you'd act up, and you'd get bored very quickly, you'd get tight. And that whole thing of having to sit down in a chair all day, especially when you're children, but anyway, for most of us, is really not how we are built. So it's interesting, isn't it? As you get older, you don't really know why you're in a bad mood, or you're a bit angry, or this, that, the other. And the chances are it's because you're not moving.
Yeah. So is it important, do you think then, to move before we get to that stage? Because I'm really guilty of this, and I'm probably other people on the call are. I kind of wait until my back hurts before I think, oh, I
Yeah,
need to move
yeah.
around, or I kind of wait until I'm really thirsty before I'm like, oh, I probably need to go and get a drink.
And I totally get that, because I was the same, and I can be the same when I'm working on something quite intense. But that's why I work. I call it intermittent fasting. That's why I work in these 90-minute, 20-minute kind of
Yeah.
downtime, 90 minutes focus, 20-minute downtime, because it makes you shift, it makes you move it. I go off somewhere else, I'll do something else. I've even got a little mini trampoline. I'll do something. I'll get that out of my system. I think it's really important that you get rid of stuff and then you prepare for the next action. So
Mm.
that's kind of how my day is organized.
Yeah, and you kind of leave space around those things. Brilliant. And
Yeah, and and also I think it's really important in this digital age where our work never ends. It just goes on and on and on and on. It's like having millions of tabs open, isn't it? That you could just keep jumping from one thing to the other, and you could just
yeah.
work forever. There's no, it's unlike physical labor where you do a job and you stop. So you have to kind of create those little rituals in between one task and the next. It's pleasing for your nervous system. It's very soothing for your nervous system to go, done,
Mm.
rest, and then move on and prepare and move on to the next thing.
Yeah. So it's kind of make consciously doing those things that,
Consciously, actually, yeah, actually make that break from one piece of action before you move to the next. And then you build into that 20 minutes, you're building kind of coming down from the action, thinking about it, processing it, because actually that's where creativity happens, and
mm.
then preparing for the next thing.
Yeah, sure. And you touched briefly just then on I haven't always been I haven't always been this calm and kind of somatic guru.
No.
So in the book you talk about it a bit, and I'd love to know, I'd love to know a bit more about it. So my favorite question is, how's your relationship with yourself currently? And then the next question is, and how has that changed? So
Yeah.
maybe that's a
So
good way to reference the before and after.
So my relationship with myself is really good. I always knew I was a good sort. I just thought, poor me, lots of things really rattle me and get in my way. And I think I was always aware that I didn't really have the tools for it. So now super calm. I mean, everyone always says to me, no matter what happens, they're just like, God, you're so calm. And I was like, yep, what else can you do? I understand that you have to be calm to be able to make rational decisions. What was I before? Well, like most people, and I guess wasn't sleeping very much, was always stressed, quite addicted to stress, thought that I think I had two beliefs, and one was that rest made you unambitious and that your feelings made you weak. So I didn't really want to do either of those things. My parents were immigrants in this country, and there wasn't a safety net, and so they taught me that you just work, 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 and you power through. I remember my mum saying, because somebody in the family had a nervous breakdown, my mum said, well, I haven't got time for a nervous breakdown. And that always really makes me laugh, because I just think, well, we didn't,
Yeah.
we didn't really have time. And I didn't ever feel in my life there was time to slow down, because actually, as often happens, Tony, is that when you do push through and good things happen, you suddenly think that that idea of you is attached to your success. So you daren't not do it like that, because you think you'll lose everything.
Mm.
You start to tie your self-image in with, how you perform. So I
Mm.
think that takes a bit of unlearning, doesn't it? Um, and as ever, people getting into this work, something happened to me. A whole series of things happened to me, and perhaps the most serious one was that I had a burst appendix. Didn't pay any attention. Thought I could breathe and yoga my way out of it. Don't even ask. And ended up having to go to hospital, and I nearly died. And I just remember thinking, and I had big studios, and I had about 50 staff. They were contractors, but still, there was a lot of people to manage. And I just remember coming out of that, as you would, just thinking, you know what, this, I don't want to be this anymore. I want to do things in a different way. And I think I've always been very heart-led. Um, but I allowed myself, I guess, to kind of, I kind of questioned myself and allowed myself to really think about what it was that I wanted. And I just got more and more interested actually in working in one-to-ones and going a lot deeper than you can. My business was studios, than you can in classes, because I think classes in cities, and I was in central London and I had a few, you're sort of just churning people in through the door and trying to offer them something new, and and then you have this real kind of transient audience and you can't really do anything very deep. And I think the older you get and the more discerning you get and the more bits fall off you and you have some emotional kind of emotional sort of uh you go a bit doolally every now and think the normal things that you did don't fix you. Like I remember people coming in doing yoga. We just had lots of women who were just incredibly high powered, and they'd come in, they'd do their yoga, and they'd come in really angry and stressed, and they'd leave really angry and stressed. It was like nothing had really changed. They were just going through the motions. And actually, what they were doing, they were bringing all their stuff in with them and doing it in exactly that way with that same attitude, unwittingly, they didn't mean it, with that same attitude. And then they'd go off and they'd wonder why they weren't changing. So I got really interested in the nervous system then, because these women, they weren't having periods, they couldn't get pregnant. They were dissatisfied or disengaged with their life, and they were kind of going through the motions of looking successful. And they were successful, but they were only successful on one front. Everything else was falling apart. And that's kind of often our definition of success. It's like, oh, who cares that you're a bit of a psychopath to your wife or your children? You've got the house, you look great, you're really skinny and you've got the clothes and you have these fabulous holidays and your Instagram looks great. But actually, who cares that you're a bit of a bitch to your PA or you're not very nice to other people? We sort of try and ignore those things because we're so bedazzled with that forward, front facing thing. Um, so yeah, I just got really interested in that and got very interested in what lies under the bonnet. And of course, your nervous system is your master system. I'll just explain what it is, just so we're clear. It's your brain, your spinal cord, and all of the communication from that into your organs and your body, and from your organs and body back into your spinal cord and your brain. And so once upon a time, we used to think that we were a brain that drives a body, but actually now with neuroscience and MRI and so on, we have a better understanding that we are more a body that drives the brain. And actually, the truth is, it's like that. We always want to isolate things, but actually, everything's so interwoven, you can't separate it at all. And I don't think I understood that when I taught yoga. I said it, but I'm not sure I truly understood it because I don't think anyone had explained it to me because it was a very cognitive idea. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a felt embodied sense. So I just got more interested in that. And I think actually, you asking me onto this is really interesting because money is such a big thing, isn't it? And our attitudes to money are obviously formed from somewhere. My background was like we didn't have any money at all. And there was a lot of, anxiety around money. But my parents were incredible. They had a house where, when I bought something, I had a flat in London, but they had a house. They did all right. But money was always quite fraught. And I don't know why, but I went the opposite way. I'm quite good at making money. I'm brilliant at spending money. And my thing with money is just have fun because they didn't have fun. And so my thing is I want the best. I'll have if I have my last tenner, I'll have the best meal I possibly can with that last tenner and go out on a great big hurrah. Do you know what I mean? So it's really funny, isn't it? My whole thing has been about I just really want to enjoy what I have and not wait for the never, never. Equally, I don't have a lot of credit. I don't really do that anymore. I used to. But what's interesting about that and the work that I do is I'm dealing with your self-image. And your self-image is, for most of us, it's formed when we're quite young, from what your parents say about you, from the O levels, A levels that you take, the degree that you go on to do, or the first job that you go on to have, and on and on and on. Before you know it, you're suddenly this person. And my sort of experience is that it's only around about your midlife, your menopausal years or your perimenopausal years. It's probably the first time you get to really question that because, you know, if you've had children, you're the post the children thing. And you are going a bit doolally because your hormones are all over the place. And you maybe you feel a bit irrelevant as well because you're of that age and you know you're kind of thinking, I don't know what my style is, I don't know who I want to be. I've sort of been this person for everybody else for so long. Um, and so it's a really common and great time to self-examine. And my work actually deals with all of you. So rather than it just being cognitive, I'm dealing with your physiology, with sensations, and all of these go on to form the other, with your emotions, with your thinking, your actions, and your behavior, which is pretty much all of you. And we
Mm.
do that through movement. I do that through movement. So really what it is, it's like a rewiring your brain through movement for better emotional health and actually physical health. I kind of think I mean both physical and emotional health, or it should just be called health, shouldn't it? Because
Yeah,
it's completely integrated. Does
yeah.
that make sense? So it's a really useful practice to examine your attitude towards yourself and money. You know, it's a really
Mm.
useful way to examine that.
Yeah. And you've touched on the words like realigning and unlearning, which I think is really
Yes.
interesting because it is for lots of us, it's kind of unlearning the things that we tell ourselves, it's unlearning the way we move, it's unlearning the way that we kind of breathe, things that like are just we take for granted until we don't, right? And then we start reflecting and then we want to change everything, don't we, everyone? And then
Yeah.
we want to change everything on a Monday night. But it's happening. But I think someone like you to be able to show us these practices and tell us why they're so important as well. It's like it's important that you breathe better because that will help your body, kind of regenerate, will help you stay fitter longer, will help you think clearer, it'll help you feel more
Yes.
happy, like all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, especially in this sort of post-truth era, is that, you know, it's kind of even more heightened now, is that we have been groomed or lobbied to not trust the signals coming from our body. We don't trust ourselves, we don't trust our sensations, we don't trust our feelings, and we absolve responsibility to ourselves to a product or a expert or a da da da. And actually, I'm completely the countering that because you know you'll come to me because you like my teaching and I can guide you, but really I want, you know, the idea is that I all I do really is help to cultivate awareness and a more compassionate relationship with yourself because it's your nervous system that is doing the work. And
Mm.
so actually you can't unlearn, you can replace old experiences with new experiences. And we don't often have time for that because doing the same thing over and over again, i.e., habit, is much more, you know, it's much more efficient in terms of energy and your time. And generally, as we go through life, our worlds become smaller and more limited. Yeah. So, you
Mm.
know, if you work in PR, you will work in PR, and that's the sort of thing that you do, and you're used to really long hours and, you know, going out and your own personal life, they all become a bit blurred. Maybe you drink quite a bit because that's all around you, and so on and so on and so on. So actually, unwittingly, you're training yourself to be that for a really, really long time. And the way to counter that, say if drink is your problem, is that you introduce other things that give you a sense of safety, calm, that maybe you use booze for. Yeah. And so the idea is that you just layer on new experiences and your nervous system just goes, oh, hello, this is interesting. This isn't what we normally do. Let's get really interested in that. So it's a shifting of your focus, but not using your cognitive mind, which I think is important because I think that's just willpower. And that's why most people, when they go, right, I'm on this regime, I'm going to do this. It's exhausting, isn't it? Maybe you do it for 3 months. And after that, you're just like, oh, I can't be bothered. Life is too hard. So this isn't that at all. This is actually I guide you and it's kind of looking at your habits and it's looking at your movement patterns and what sort of patterns you get stuck in. So for instance, I taught a woman who she used to have these non-epileptic seizures every time she got alarmed because she'd had quite a traumatic childhood and she'd been in therapy for most of her life. And it was awful. It was really debilitating because anytime anything happened to her, her tell was her arm would go up and then she'd start fitting. which was awful. You know, she couldn't go out on her own and so on and so on. And so every time, so what I taught her to do was to notice the signals coming from her body before she hit that fit. It was like, well, what happens? Do you know what I mean? Can we explore that? And so I'd guide her through movement. And anytime she felt a bit overwhelmed, she'd then say, oh, well, this happens and that happens. I was like, right, okay, you're going to listen to that. But also, whenever I guide you, you're not going to go all the way there. Come and find the granularity in that movement. So you're not always going from 0 to 10. Does that make sense? And I think that's what we all do in life. We go from exhausted in bed, really tired, to like room without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And you know, we don't have time to self-reflect. And so self-reflection is quite a big part of this. But again, it's really guided by all the other aspects that make up your self-image, not just cognitive mind.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because the more I talk about it, the more mysterious it sounds. And actually it's really easy, and you'll see it when I guide you and I'll sort of explain what I've done, and you can kind of have an idea of that.
Shall we get
But
into it?
it's quite nice to discuss the how it works, isn't
Oh
it?
yeah,
And
absolutely. Especially
the why it works.
yeah, especially with our group, we're here for that 100%. It's
Yes,
like, so
great.
I think it's nice to do the practices, but to understand like some of the science and just some of the and practical like case studies of you talking about people you work with, lots of whom we can relate to, those kind of like, oh, you know, kind of doing the stressful exercise just to do some exercise and then that's not actually really helped us kind of calm down. Shall we
No.
get into the practices then?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Would you like to do that, everyone? All
yeah,
right.
let's do it.
I'm going to pop on a little chime that I want you to listen to, and that should come through the screen. Can you all give me a thumbs up to let me know you can hear that, whoever's got their screens on? Can you hear that?
I can't hear it now.
Oh, I wonder why it's disappeared. Let me see if I can put it back through.
It might be because I shared the book cover earlier.
Ah,
Zoom
yeah.
might. I can hear
Yes.
that.
Great.
Guys,
All right.
yeah, brilliant. I'll get rid of
Perfect.
myself
Lovely.
for a minute.
Thank you. All right. So come, I'm presuming you're all sitting. Yeah. So come to sit on the edge of your chair and have your feet on the ground. Ideally, you don't have shoes on. Yeah. So you kind of really want to be able to feel. Ideally, you don't have socks on, but see how you feel. Yeah. So you're sitting right on the edge. And then from here, find your sit bones, and you're going to place one hand underneath your right sit bone. Let's all do the same thing. And go in a bit, and you want to sit your right sit bone in your right hand. Yeah. And then don't lean over to the left. Just let yourself just gently yield down. You're not pushing. You're just letting yourself yield down onto that hand. Let your eyes close. And even though you've got a hand underneath your bottom, act normal. Be as relaxed as you possibly can. You'll hear the chime. All I'm going to ask you to do is the next time you hear it, you're going to breathe in through your nostrils slowly until you hear it again. There you go. That was your inhale. Let your belly rise. That's your exhale through the nose. Let your belly fall. And carry on, please. And please don't worry if you lose your breath, just find the chime and you can join in. And it's quite normal to find that a bit slow. So don't worry, just keep jumping back in. Without disturbing your breath, everyone, very slowly slide your right hand out and notice how you're really aware of your right sit bone now, aren't you? Yeah, it's really uppermost in your mind. Can you feel that? And can you feel that from your right sit bone? There's real clarity from the right sit bone all the way up to the top of your head. It kind of feels like you're rooted on the right side without you pushing, without you making anything happen at all. You've just found the bone. Could you please do your left hand, take that underneath your left sit bone. Sit bone's a bit closer in towards the midline than you think. Let yourself yield onto that, both sides of the pelvis, nice and evenly. Don't lean over to the right. Find your breath. And then very slowly slide the hand away. And now you should be really aware of your sit bones. And perhaps you're aware that your pelvis feels like it's very nicely yielded down. And then that allows everything to root up from it. So rising up from that rooting all the way to the top of your head. Nice. Turn your palms up, have them on your thighs. And then keep your lips together, but let your lower jaw drop away. So that you're not using these muscles around the face to keep your lower jaw glued. And then just keep breathing at this pace. This is going to be your foundation. And no matter what else I give you or where else we go, you're going to keep trying to do this without disturbing your breath at all. So we're going to explore the breath. And right now, it might feel like a bit of an effort. It's like a cognitive task. I've asked you to do something, you're focusing on it. Maybe you're trying quite hard to listen out for the bell, listen to my instruction. Let's get a little bit more embodied. So take your fingers and without opening your eyes, take them onto your collarbones. Your fingers will point upwards, your palms will face you. Yeah. Right hand on right collarbone, left hand on left collarbone. Let your thumbs be released onto your chest as well, wherever they lie. You're not pushing, you're just sensing. So right hand on right collarbone, left hand on left collarbone. Your elbows are nice and heavy. And then from here, as you inhale, the next time you inhale, notice the movement of your collarbones. And as you exhale, notice the movement of your collarbones. And I'll give you some clues. When you inhale, you might feel your collarbones rising up towards your head. You're not doing it, you're sensing it. And as you exhale, they might fall down as if they were going down towards your pelvis. As you inhale, you might also notice that your collarbones go outwards, left and right. And as you exhale, you might notice that the collarbones draw back in towards each other again. So you've got the upwards towards your head and outwards. You might also notice that your collarbones go forwards. So if you were seated here, they're going forwards in space as you inhale. And as you exhale, they gently sink back again. And just be with that for a few breaths. It's almost like your fingers are listening to you breathing. And you've done something really interesting here. You've created a neural circuit from fingers to collarbones. Your hands and fingers are the really busy parts of you, sort of grab at things and put things in your mouth and stroke things and touch things with your hands. So it's kind of quite a critical way that we interact with our environment. And when you slow your fingers and your hands down, your brain gets really interested. So your brain, its main job really is to budget your resources. It doesn't know when you're going to get a shock, when you need to run away from something, when you're going to get alarmed. So it just needs to keep you nice and even throughout the day. And it generally checks out of your habits because you're relatively safe. If you sit at a desk all day, it knows what you do there. So it doesn't really check in with any of those things. It just thinks that's how you have to be. When you do anything new and novel, your brain just suddenly goes, hang on, what is this? And quite a lot of your resources, it's quite expensive to learn and to get involved in something new on a budgetary sense, which is interesting as we're talking about money. But it's noticing that your hands aren't busy at all. So your hands and fingers, these busy parts of you, the external part is having an influence on the internal part, and the internal part of you is having an influence on your external part. And just really tune into the movement of collarbones. You're breathing and you're just interested in the movement of your collarbones. Nice. From here, really slowly, without opening your eyes or disturbing your breath, let your hands come back down. Back of the hands are on your thighs. And notice if your breathing is a bit easier. Like you're not really having to think quite so much about it. The keeping in time to this chime, a bit more effortless maybe. Okay, keep your eyes closed, stay with the breath. Just identify you're sitting right on top of your sit bones and tune into where your pubic bones are. So exactly where you think they are, underneath the pubic mound. And then I'll say it a few times, so don't worry if you don't understand the first time. But all you're going to do is you're going to roll your pubic bones towards your last rib. So your lower back rounds a little bit. In fact, the whole back will round a little bit. And what you're actually doing is you're rolling off the sit bones towards the back. Yeah. And then come back up onto your sit bones. And then do that in time with your exhale. So for your exhale and the duration of your exhale, roll your pubic bones towards your last rib. And on your inhale, slowly come back up again. Nice. Some of you are going really fast. So here's a question for you. Who told you to do that? Interesting, isn't it? Can you, a bit like a dimmer switch, can you align your movement to your breath? So it's not an on-off switch. It's not a sudden thing. It actually isn't that interesting, the range of movement that you make. The slower and smaller, the better. So some of you are moving quite big. It's often the yogis, actually. But don't think about doing, think about feeling it, sense it. In fact, come up and sit on your sit bones again. Stay with your breath. And this time, can you imagine that you're doing it? Same movement, but can you imagine it? And of course, in your imagination, anything's possible. It can be as so closely aligned to your breath. So in your imagination, on your exhale, you're rolling the pubic bone towards your last rib and everything rounds a little bit. And you're really aligning the breath to the movement, which means the movement isn't faster than the breath. And nor is there any point of that movement that feels harsh, too much. When you feel you've got it and you understand it, you've actually made a motor neuron plan. But could you very slowly transition from thinking about it to doing it? And it's almost like I've taken a putty rubber between you thinking, sensing, and doing. So the lines are really blurred in between them. And interestingly, those things are really, really intimately intertwined in your brain, those regions, thinking, sensing, and moving. Nice. Everyone's really quieting down. Great. In terms of your movement, lovely. The next time you're up on your sit bones, pause. We're going to go the other way on the inhale. Imagine it first, please. You're going to roll your pubic bone away from your last rib so that your chest lifts up and you've got a nice long arc in your lower back. Doesn't have to be deep, it's long. And as you exhale, you come back onto your sit bones. And could you please, in your imagination, explore that movement? So in more brutal terms, it would be an arch of your back, but that's too strong. Words are a lot more violent than what I mean. You're moving from your felt sense, not your cognitive mind, from your whole self-image, if you like. Nice. Then come back onto your sit bones. So you're upright. And notice how that's changed, sitting up on your sit bones. Notice if you feel longer or you're more aware of the curves of your spine. And then from here, really slowly, let me say it before you do it. Could you roll your pubic bones to your last rib on the exhale and your pubic bones away from the last rib on the inhale? So you're combining the two. Now, when you make it more complicated, you actually need to make it less, the whole movement less, reduce your range. So go slowly, yeah? You don't have to go all the way to arch and all the way to rounded. There could just be this really beautiful sweet spot in the middle that just feels really soothing to you and gentle and so aligned with your breathing that it feels pleasant and just uses the appropriate amount of your energy, not too much. Notice if your head is truly moving in response to your pelvis, or are you doing something around the neck? Get rid of that. Just let your head respond to your pelvis. Okay, let that go and come back up onto your sit bones. And then very slowly open up your eyes. We'll just take our focus off of that for a little bit. And open your eyes and notice how you feel. Notice if your mind's a bit quieter, if you feel a bit calmer. Okay, I'm going to change it a little bit on the fly. I've seen quite a lot of people with some neck and head things. So let's do something with that then. So come up and sit on your sit bones again. And the back of the hands are on your lap. And I'm going to ask you to imagine, it's a bit of a funny visual. Imagine that you've got a long felt tip pen coming out of your forehead. And it goes all the way forwards. You can close your eyes. And then with this very long felt tip pen, could you draw a circle on the wall in front of you? And the circle is about football, no bigger than a football. Now, when we draw with our felt tip pen nice and slowly, the chin doesn't go up and down. We're not drawing with the top of the head, we're drawing with the nose. Or the forehead, rather. We're drawing with the front of the forehead. So the chin doesn't go down. Someone's dropping their chin down. Yeah, I see you. So it's coming straight out of here, and it's that plane that you're drawing the circle on rather than all the way around the room. Does that make sense? Yeah. And make that circle smooth all the way around. And so you might be aware that you've got this slightly forwards momentum, like there's an expansion forwards, maybe just in your perception. Don't make it big, don't make it too big. And really focus on it so you don't go off into a rhythm. Generally, when we go off in a rhythm, we're not really thinking. And this is all about you really thinking about the quality of the circle. Pause and go around in the opposite way. You're drawing that circle on the front wall. And then pause. And now you're going to imagine you've got a felt tip pen on exactly the same point, but at the back of your head. And you're going to draw a circle on the wall behind you. And notice how it feels to draw a circle behind you. What happens? So it's with the head, not with the whole body. That you'll feel an impulse. You're not rolling around on your sit bones. You're doing it with the back of the skull. There's a felt tip. Then you're not rolling around. You're not rolling around on your sit bones. It's the back of the head. It's quite a small movement, much smaller. So your chin doesn't go down. It's kind of on the plane behind you. And notice how that's shifted your head back a bit. Pause. Go around in the other direction. And pause. And now imagine that you've got a felt tip pen at the top of the head and you're drawing a circle on the ceiling. And it's through the top of the head, not the forehead, the top of the head, center top. Go slowly. So drawing the circle isn't the important thing or the interesting thing. It's the quality and how circly your circle is all the way around. And so for some of us, there might be some parts of this circle that we can't, are a bit jagged, not as smooth. And that could be really interesting. That could relate to something else happening with you. Could be in the hip, could be in the ribs. So if I was working with you on a one-to-one, I'd want to explore that. Be like, oh, that's interesting. What's going on there? All right. And then go in the other direction. And pause. And we'll end on a funny one. Imagine that you've got a felt tip pen coming out of your left ear and your right ear, and you're drawing circles on the left wall and the right wall. So there's this real expansion of your perception, left and right. And what does that do to you sitting in your seated position? What does that do to you? And can you draw a equal circle on the left wall as you do on the right wall? And there will be some movement, but don't rock through your pelvis. That isn't, there'll be a tiny little bit of movement, but you really are doing this with your ears, your left ear and your right ear. And then you'll let the impulse of that movement move through you. So don't keep rigid. There will be some movement, but don't do this from your breastbone, for instance. You really want to think about your left ear and your right ear. And you want to think about all the way over there to the left wall and the right wall. Pause in the middle and then go the other way. And then let that go and come back to just sitting up in your sit bones with your palms up and the back of the hands on the thighs. And just breathe for a few breaths to this chime. And see if breathing at this pace has gotten easier and more intuitive, perhaps. You're not having to think so much about it. Notice the quality of your mind. And then from here, really slowly flicker your eyes open. Hmm. Hmm. How is everyone? What did we do there? It's getting you to do things you don't normally do. It was shifting the focus of your brain. It was introducing things that are so far away from your habit that you forget about your habit. So the thing about working too hard to breathe at this pace, maybe it feeling a bit weird, moves away. And then I give you one thing to do, and you're like, oh, that's a bit weird. And then I give you something else to do, and you're like, oh, that's even weirder. And off and off we go. But actually, the process of doing something even more challenging each time, by the time you come back to the first thing, it's easy. Your nervous system has reorganized and figured it out. Hmm. Interesting, isn't it? Anyone got any comments about that? Any observations? I'm just going to get rid of that little noise.
Did anyone else find it much harder on the back of the head than any of the others? It is like, yeah, you're just kind of perception, like you say, isn't it? An awareness of and trying not to move your chin when you're telling us
Yeah.
to do something else.
And also, what often happens is, and I saw a few people do it, is that they were moving from the parts of them that they found really easy, your bigger joints,
Yeah.
because they find this movement really hard because we don't do it. And so, generally in life, what happens is you struggle with the back of the head, someone said. Yeah, because if you think about it, in life, we present this. We think about this. We're always forward facing, aren't we? We don't really think about the sides and the back of us. And so here's why it's so interesting in our self-image, because if you're only dealing with an aspect of yourself or one plane of yourself, then your nervous system, I'll try and explain this really simply because it's fascinating. So your brain sits in a black box. It doesn't know anything. You are feeding information through your visual system, auditory system, through smell, taste, touch. So you have built up experiences based on your environment and how you interact with your environment. So what that means then, if you're only thinking about this, your brain just thinks, this is all I've got. I just breathe into this bit. That's all I've got. I don't have anything else. Once you start to And it actually creates a body map in your brain of you moving through your environment. Which is why, actually, here's something interesting. When you go through a doorway, you somehow know, don't you, when you put a hat on, that you have to come down again a little bit. How do you know that? So something will have happened with your visual system, touch, putting it on your head, sensing it. Lots of recalibrations happen, and you know that you've got to duck down a little bit. You might not always get it right. So when you start to become aware of yourself as a multi-dimensional organism in a multi-dimensional space, it's so freeing. Suddenly you become really capable and able, and you've just got more lung tissue to breathe into, and you've just got more of you to help you support you in life. Does that make sense? Instead of always thinking you're just this. And so you're not breathing very much into your lungs because your experience is only breathing up here, perhaps, and breathing quite fast. You sit down all day, so your hip flexors get really tight, your quads get really tight. And so then your experience is that you're not very mobile, so it stops you doing certain things, and you start limiting yourself based on your behaviors and ideas about yourself. So when you do this sort of work and you can kind of sense yourself in the space that you live in, it's incredibly liberating. And it's also very, very grounding for the nervous system. Because when you're just this, it's quite panicky. It doesn't know, who you are in space. It doesn't have a lot of information. But when you have all of this information, it's kind of like, yeah, I feel really I feel very it's a difference between self-belief and confidence.
Mm.
That inner confidence is quite powerful. Self-belief is a bit made up, isn't it? Because it's all cognitive. It's like, I used to, it's really funny. I hope there aren't any men here. But I used to employ people, and in the staff appraisals, all the girls would just be like, the young women, or would always kind of go, well, I think I did all right. And I was quite good at that, even though they were really super clever. And the boys would go, I thought I did 110%.
Give me a pay rise.
Yes. And it just always made me giggle because that self-belief, there's not much substance there, but actually that really deep kind of confidence that comes from your core is almost unshakable. And it's that sense you want to bring in this journey through money for the month, I think. It's kind of like, okay, maybe I've messed up a bit with money. Maybe I'm scared of it because of what's happened to me in my life. But if I've got this really great, confident kind of deep in my core that I'm clever and I can do things and I can work things out and I can resolve things, and I can have a structure to what I do, then that really helps to pave the way for behavioral change, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
exactly. So kind of like you say, you're kind of like feeling in your system is telling you you're safe and you've got that confidence,
exactly.
which then
Exactly
helps your
that.
brain do the stuff that it needs to do to kind of move you forward.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect, Tracy. That's
Mm.
exactly that. We like to think that we're really sophisticated, and we really are, but not in the way we think we are. We think our brains overrule everything else, and our brain is the sophisticated thing, and we can think ourselves out of a feeling state. Well, you can't. You have
Mm.
to feel yourself out of that state, because
Yeah.
you felt yourself into it. And a good kind of idea is that when you were a baby, you would have responded to the whole world with your whole self. And in
Yeah.
fact, you wouldn't have had language. So actually, all you had was your whole self response. Somewhere around the age of 3, I think, you start to separate the mind and body. And, that's a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe for all of us because then we start thinking, my mind, the body. And then I think that actually is what creates our biggest dissociative disconnects.
Yeah, total disconnect. You're right. And I love in here that you've share all the practices for different times of the day, including sitting down, emotional rescue in case like in SOS times. And
Yes.
I also love that you say, we're going to close in a minute, so I've just realized the time, everybody. If any questions, pop them in chat really quickly. I also love you say you want people to get comfortable with looking silly in public. Because
Yes.
if you're sitting on the bus and you're doing you know like pelvic rolls or whatever, then
Do it. Do you know what? Just
do it.
just do it. There's worse things happening in the world than you rolling your pelvis on a
Yeah,
bus. Do you know what
yeah.
I mean? I think embrace your weirdness. Be a weirdo. It's really good. I think actually weirdos will have our day.
Weirdos unite. We're all weird
Yeah.
here. Yeah,
Yeah. Be
we're all
be a
just
bit
weird enough.
weirder. Yeah. Can
Naheed,
I just say something very quickly about my book?
of
If
course.
you order it on Waterstones by the 14th of March, I'll enter you all into a free prize draw to win a space on my retreat, which is on the
Oh,
23rd. It's in London, and it's a whole day of retreat. It's worth 195 quid. I've only just put it out there today. And it's just lots of gorgeous practices, some somatic yoga in there as well,
yeah.
and a really lovely lunch. And you'll
Okay.
get to meet lots of nice people. So if you did want to buy it, now's the time.
Yeah, great. David, I think I might have shared an Amazon link with you. So if you can find the Waterstones link and share that quickly, that would be awesome. Naheed, while people are just while David's just getting that link then. Oh, there you go. Oh, he's on it. Head of tech is on it.
Yay.
Do you have time just to talk us through quickly jiggling and because
Yes,
I feel like that's like a thing that everybody could do before they go
that
to
is so easy. So ideally you want to be, I'm going to try and show it to you standing up. I prefer being on the floor, but I also do it standing up. And it's really simply, you're kind of doing that. When you're on the floor, and I kind of go from foot to foot, and then sometimes I do that. And the reason this is so good is you're sort of discombobulating your nervous system. It doesn't know what you're doing. And therefore, what it does is it lengthens and contracts muscle really quickly. Yeah. And it's a great way to get out of any funk if you've been sitting down for a bit, or I don't know, you've had a funny call or a big bill. You can do that. It's so much better on the floor because when you lie on the floor, your extensor muscles on the back of you, which have to grip quite tightly to keep you upright, they completely release. So that will immediately soothe the system. But then you get your legs out and you dig your heels in a bit so that your knees are soft. And then you rock your heels. Let me just see if I can quickly show you over here. So you kind of rock your heels like that. And then
Okay,
you
so
let
you're
that
lying flat
movement
on your
travel
back.
all the way to your back. Huh?
Yeah, you're lying flat on your back and you're using your
Lie
heels
flat
to
on your
move your
back
body.
and you just rock your heels. Your toes will go backwards and forwards, but you really, which is fine, but it's really about the heels. So don't worry about that. It's not so much from the toes, it's from the heels. And you want the rest of you to respond. So you're not bracing yourself on the floor. You're being like a floppy doll and you
Yeah.
just let, and pick up the pace a bit until you find the right pace for you, because too slow feels too effortful. And that is the thing I do before I go to bed. I do that in between my clients, and I always do that before I go to bed. And I might even do that first thing in the morning. It's just been my go-to. And then if I've heard something upsetting, which is all the time nowadays, isn't it? So if I've heard something upsetting or I'm crying, I'll probably get on the floor and do that. I did it throughout the whole pandemic because I was so frightened
Yeah.
of everything. It's super. It's my go-to practice. If you had to take, I don't know, two practices, the breath and jiggling would be it. But
Brilliant.
we can do a lot more. There's lots to be had, and there's lots in that book, and they're really easy to understand, hopefully.
They definitely are. How long would you do it for, the jiggling? Just as long as you've got,
So
basically.
yeah, the thing about movement is you want to start it and stop it and start it and stop it. Yeah. So I would establish the breath first, then I'd come into jiggling, and then I'd just let it go, because actually it's quite effortful. You're doing something, and you'll notice that all of your muscles start to release, even the muscles you didn't realize you were contracting. So I don't, seconds really.
Okay.
And something really important, it's in the not doing that your brain learns. You can't do and learn at the same time. So more jiggling doesn't mean that you get to be really evolved. It's in the not doing it that your brain and your nervous system start to piece something together. And
Do you
that's
mean
really
in
crucial.
the so after you've done it, that's what
No,
I'm
I mean jiggling and then stopping and noticing
ah,
what happens,
and then
and
jiggling
then
again.
starting jiggling again, and then stopping and noticing what happens.
Wow, brilliant. Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. But maybe don't do this one on the bus.
Oh, give it a go. Oh,
Give it
go
a
on.
go.
Let's,
And send a
let's.
picture to us if you do it, everybody. Okay, thank you, Naheed. Thank you so much. We've shared links to the book. We've got a few pre-orders already. Thank you for that.
Yay,
That was
thank
so
you.
awesome. I hope everyone enjoyed and is feeling soothed, peaceful. Looks like we've got a few calm faces now, so that's so nice. Yeah, out 21st of March officially.